What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what he thinks is a friendly interview only to find himself ambushed by pointed accusations and personal attacks? Well, you're about to witness one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this is going to be wild. The studio lights were blazing hot as Jude Law settled into his chair across from the panel of The View. He'd done hundreds of interviews over his career, promoting everything from indie dramas to big-budget blockbusters. But something felt different today. The energy in the room was tense, almost predatory. "Welcome back to The View," Joy Behar announced with that trademark smirk that her regular viewers knew all too well. "We're here with the incredibly talented Jude Law, who's here to talk about his new film. But before we get to that, Jude, I have to ask you something that's been bothering me." Jude shifted slightly in his seat, maintaining his polished composure. "Of course, fire away." "Your recent comments about American politics during that interview with The Guardian, they were quite something," Joy began, her voice taking on that confrontational edge she was known for. "You basically said that Americans don't understand nuance when it comes to international affairs. That's pretty condescending, don't you think?" The audience fell silent. This wasn't what anyone had expected from what was supposed to be a light entertainment segment. Jude's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I think there might be a misunderstanding here. I never said anything remotely close to that. In fact, I specifically praised American audiences for their sophistication when discussing my latest project." "Oh, come on now," Joy interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Don't backtrack. You said, and I quote, that American viewers need everything spelled out for them because they can't handle complex narratives." "That is absolutely not what I said," Jude replied firmly, his British accent becoming more pronounced as his frustration grew. "I would never make such a blanket statement about any audience, least of all American audiences who have supported my work for decades." Joy leaned forward, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "So, you're saying The Guardian misquoted you? That's convenient. Or maybe you just don't want to own up to what you actually think about the people who buy tickets to your movies." "I'm saying you're misrepresenting my words entirely." Jude shot back, his voice remaining controlled, but with an edge of steel creeping in. "I spoke about the universal challenges of storytelling across cultures. Nothing more. If you're going to quote me, at least have the courtesy to quote me accurately." The other panelists exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was clearly not going according to the show's usual script. "Courtesy." Joy laughed. But there was no warmth in it. "That's rich coming from someone who thinks Americans are too stupid to understand your artistic vision. Tell me, Jude, is that why you left Hollywood for a while? Because you couldn't stand working with all us simple-minded Americans?" Jude's jaw tightened visibly. "I find your line of questioning not only inaccurate, but deliberately inflammatory. I've never expressed anything but gratitude and respect for American audiences and the American film industry, but you did leave." Joy pressed on right after that string of box office disappointments. "Alfie, All the King's Men, The Holiday did okay, I guess, but let's be honest, your American career wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. My career choices have always been based on the quality of the material and the opportunity to work with talented people." Jude responded, his diplomatic training as an actor serving him well despite the obvious provocation. "I've been fortunate to work on both sides of the Atlantic with extraordinary directors and fellow actors." "That's a very political answer," Joyce smirked. "Very safe, very British, I suppose. Always so proper, even when you're being criticized." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Jude could feel the heat of the lights, but more than that, he could feel the deliberate attempt to corner him into saying something he'd regret. "I prefer to be thoughtful rather than reactive," he said carefully. "Unlike some people, I don't believe that television gives anyone license to be deliberately hostile to their guests." Joy's eyes flashed. "Hostile? I'm asking legitimate questions here. You come on our show, you should be prepared to answer tough questions. This isn't some fluffy British talk show where everyone's going to pat you on the head and tell you how wonderful you are. There's a difference between tough questions and misrepresenting someone's words to create conflict where none exists." Jude replied, his voice rising slightly for the first time. "You've built this entire line of questioning on a false premise." "False premise?" Joyce scoffed. "I read the interview myself. You talked about how British actors have to dumb down their performances for American audiences." "That is completely untrue," Jude said, his composure finally beginning to crack. "I challenge you to produce that quote, because it doesn't exist." What you're doing right now is exactly the kind of gotcha journalism that gives American media a bad reputation. The studio audience was dead silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Gotcha journalism. Joy's voice rose to match his "I'm doing my job," which is holding celebrities accountable for their words and actions. Just because you're used to being treated like royalty doesn't mean you get a free pass here. Treated like royalty. Jude's voice cut through the studio air with a sharpness that made everyone sit up straighter. You want to talk about accountability? Let's start with your accountability to basic journalistic integrity. You've spent the last 5 minutes attacking me based on quotes that don't exist. Joy wasn't backing down. Oh, please spare me the lecture about journalism. I've been doing this longer than you've been making movies, sweetheart. And I know deflection when I see it. Deflection? Jude leaned forward in his chair, his famous composure completely abandoned now. You want me to defend statements I never made? That's not deflection. That's refusing to participate in your manufactured controversy. Manufactured. Joy's laugh was harsh and mocking. Everything's manufactured with you people, isn't it? The humble British actor routine. The wounded dignity when someone calls you out. You think your accent makes you sound more intelligent than the rest of us? The other hosts were looking increasingly uncomfortable, but none of them seemed willing or able to intervene as Joy continued her assault. My accent has nothing to do with this conversation, Jude replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. What does have something to do with it is your apparent inability to conduct a professional interview without resorting to personal attacks and fabricated quotes. Personal attacks? Joy's voice rose to a near shout. You want to see a personal attack? Let's talk about your personal life. 3 different women, multiple children with different mothers. But sure, lecture me about professionalism. The studio fell into shocked silence. Even for The View, this was crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Jude's face went completely pale, then flushed red. You are completely out of line. My family has nothing to do with any of this, doesn't it, though? Joy pressed on mercilessly. You want to talk about American values, about how sophisticated you are. In America, we value family stability. We value men who take responsibility for their actions. How dare you? Jude's voice was now barely contained fury. How dare you drag my children into this? They have done nothing to deserve being part of your petty attempt to create drama for your ratings. Petty, Joy shot back. I'm pointing out the hypocrisy of someone who thinks he's better than us, while his own life is a mess of broken relationships and abandoned commitments. Jude stood up abruptly from his chair, his microphone nearly falling to the floor. That is enough. I will not sit here and allow you to attack my family on national television. Sit down, Joy commanded, pointing at his chair. You agreed to come on this show. You don't get to storm off just because someone asks you hard questions. Hard questions. Jude's voice was incredulous. This isn't journalism. This is a public execution. You've decided to attack me personally based on lies. And when I defend myself, you attack my children. I didn't attack your children, Joy said with false innocence. I simply pointed out that someone who can't maintain stable relationships maybe shouldn't be criticizing American culture. When exactly did I criticize American culture? Jude demanded, his hands clenched at his sides. Show me one quote, one actual statement where I said anything negative about America or Americans. Joy fumbled for a moment, clearly not expecting to be challenged so directly. It was the tone, the implication. The tone. Jude's voice dripped with disbelief. You're destroying my reputation on national television because you didn't like my tone in an interview you apparently didn't even read carefully enough to quote accurately. Your reputation was already questionable. Joy fired back. What everyone knows. Jude was truly angry now, his voice carrying across the entire studio. What everyone knows is that you've built a career on attacking people who can't fight back effectively on live television. What everyone knows is that you hide behind the pretense of journalism to justify your cruelty. The audience was completely silent, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Cruelty? Joy's voice turned mocking again. Poor little movie star can't handle a few tough questions. Maybe stick to those British talk shows where they'll ask you about your favorite tea and call it an interview. A few tough questions. Jude's composure was completely gone now. You started with fabricated quotes, moved on to personal attacks about my career, and then brought my children into it. That's not tough questioning. That's character assassination. Character assassination. Joy stood up now too, matching his energy. You don't have any character to assassinate. You're just another privileged actor who thinks the world owes him respect he hasn't earned. Respect I haven't earned. Jude's voice was now loud enough to echo in the studio. I've worked for 30 years in this industry. I've never once been involved in a scandal. Never once attacked a fellow actor. Never once used my platform to tear down others the way you're doing right now. Oh, you want to talk about platforms? Joy's eyes lit up with malicious glee. Let's talk about how you use your platform. Coming to America, taking roles from American actors, then going back to Britain and talking about how unsophisticated we are. That never happened, Jude said through gritted teeth. You are literally making things up as you go along. Am I? Joy reached for some papers on the desk. Because I have the interview right here. Then read it. Jude challenged her. Read the actual quote you're claiming exists. Read it word for word right now on live television. Joy's hand hovered over the papers, her confident expression flickering for just a moment. Joy's hand froze over the papers. The confidence that had carried her through the entire attack suddenly seemed to evaporate under the direct challenge. Well, Jude pressed, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You've been quoting this interview for the last 10 minutes. Surely you can find the actual words you claim, I said. Joy shuffled through the papers, her movements becoming increasingly frantic. The other hosts watched in stunned silence as their colleagues' carefully constructed attack began to crumble. It's in here somewhere, Joy muttered, avoiding eye contact with both Jude and the camera. No, it isn't, Jude said with deadly calm. Because I never said what you're claiming. I said, you built this entire ambush on absolutely nothing. I read it myself, Joy insisted weakly, still shuffling papers. Then read it now, Jude demanded. Word for word. Show America exactly what I supposedly said that was so offensive it justified this attack on my character and my family. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Joy's face was flushed, her usual quick wit completely abandoned. You know what? Jude continued, his voice gaining strength. I'll make this easier for you. I'll tell you exactly what I said in that Guardian interview. I said that storytelling is a universal language that transcends cultural boundaries. I said that audiences everywhere, including American audiences, are sophisticated enough to appreciate complex narratives. I praised the American film industry for giving international actors opportunities to work on incredible projects. Joy finally looked up from her papers, her expression trapped somewhere between defiance and embarrassment. That doesn't sound very offensive, does it? Jude continued. But somehow you twisted that into me, calling Americans stupid and unsophisticated. How exactly does praising American audiences translate into insulting them? The implication was clear, Joy said weakly. The implication, Jude's voice rose again. The only implication here is that you decided to destroy someone's reputation on live television without even bothering to verify your facts first. I don't have to verify anything, Joy snapped, some of her old fire returning. I'm not a court of law. No, you're not. Jude agreed. You're something much worse. You're someone with a platform and an audience who chooses to use that power irresponsibly. You attack people knowing they can't adequately defend themselves in this format. Then why did you come on the show? Joy shot back. Because I thought I was coming on a talk show, not a public execution, Jude replied. I thought I was going to discuss my work with professionals, not be ambushed by someone who apparently doesn't understand the difference between actual journalism and tabloid gossip. Tabloid gossip. Joy's voice was shrill now. This is legitimate television. Legitimate television doesn't attack guests based on fabricated quotes, Jude said firmly. Legitimate television doesn't drag someone's children into a professional disagreement. Legitimate television has some basic standards of decency. The other hosts were visibly squirming. One of them finally tried to intervene. Maybe we should move on to talking about the new film, she suggested weakly. Move on. Jude turned to face her. After your colleague just spent 15 minutes attacking my character and my family based on lies, after she demanded I defend statements I never made, we're just going to move on to talking about my movie like nothing happened. Joy finally found her voice again. You're being overly dramatic. Overly dramatic? Jude whirled back to face her. You called my personal life a mess, suggested I'm irresponsible with my children, and claimed I think Americans are stupid. All based on an interview you clearly never actually read. And I'm being overly dramatic. I'm God. Your personal life is public record, Joy said defensively. My personal life is none of your business, Jude replied sharply. And it has absolutely nothing to do with my work or anything I've ever said publicly. You brought it up purely to hurt and embarrass me. That's what happens when you're a public figure, Joy said with a shrug. No, Jude said firmly. That's what happens when you're interviewed by someone who has no professional standards and no basic human decency. Most interviewers understand the difference between legitimate questions and personal attacks. The camera captured every moment as Joy's face cycled through anger, embarrassment, and defiance. I've been doing this job longer than you've been famous, she said desperately. Then you should know better, Jude replied coldly. Experience should have taught you some basic professionalism. Instead, you've used your years in television to perfect the art of the ambush interview. Fine, Joy said, crossing her arms. If you don't like my questions, there's the door. Actually, Jude said, reaching for his microphone and carefully removing it. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Because I refuse to participate in whatever this is supposed to be, he stood up fully, straightening his jacket with deliberate calm. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, addressing the camera directly. I came here today to talk about my work and ended up being attacked based on completely fabricated quotes. I hope you'll take a moment to actually read the Guardian interview she's been referencing. You'll find it says exactly the opposite of what you've been told. Joy sat in stunned silence as Jude continued. I've had the privilege of working with American actors, directors, and crews for decades. They are some of the most talented, dedicated, and professional people I've ever encountered. I would never insult them or their audiences, and I certainly don't appreciate having words put in my mouth for the sake of manufactured controversy. With that, he walked off the set, leaving Joy Behar sitting alone at the desk, papers scattered in front of her as the cameras continued to roll. The studio remained silent for several long seconds before someone finally called for a commercial break. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen anything like this on daytime television? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible moments like this.